Dave Janda. Welcome back to Operation Freedom Briefings. The goal of these briefings and my weekly radio show, Operation Freedom, which airs every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern live at Wham Talk 1600. You can stream it live at davejanda.com. Our goal with the show and with this briefing is to provide you information the bought-off lamestream fake media is not going to touch. Join us at davejanda.com. We upload a tremendous amount of free information in our public site. We also have a subscription site. For a mere 30 cents a day, we deep dive on issues, bring other guests, other shows to the platform, provide you information that you're not going to see, hear, or read in the bought-off lamestream fake media. Why that same media is owned by the globalist syndicate that wants to strip you of your freedom, your liberty, and any amount of finances that you've accumulated throughout your life. I want to focus on Cy Hirsch today, and him actually being an ally, I think probably much to his chagrin, for Donald Trump. Cy Hirsch is, I believe in my lifetime, one of the best and most courageous investigative journalists that has ever inhabited the planet. Cy Hirsch recently wrote an autobiography, a memoir. It's called Reporter. And in this, he presents 3 simple lessons from his life's work as an investigative journalist. Remember, Cy Hirsch is the guy who brought forward very unpleasant activities and very pleasant events in our government's track record. The My Lai massacre, Abu Ghraib, the Osama bin Laden narrative he blew apart, and the Osama bin Laden's death narrative he blew apart. And he also actually has taken sides with Donald Trump on the fake Russian hack issue. But here are the 3 simple lessons that Hirsch has come to that he presents in his book. 1, the powerful, the globalist, prey mercilessly upon the powerless, us, up to and including mass murder. Overstatement? I don't think so. There isn't a war the globalists have not funded, both sides have not supported. They love war. You don't see a Rothschild or a Rockefeller or Lazard, Pincus, Warburg. You don't see them going to war or being drafted. Oh, no. You see the Smiths, the Jones, the Jandas, the us, what they call the useless eaters. We're the ones who go to war. We're the ones who get maimed, murdered. No, there isn't a war the globalists haven't loved and supported. So when he states that they support mass murder, point of fact. 2, the powerful, the globalists, lie constantly about their predations, the actions of attacking and plundering the rest of us. Good point. 3, the natural instinct of the media is to let the powerful get away with it. In other words, what Hirsch is saying, quote, the media is the enemy of the people, end quote. Where have you heard that before? Here again, he sides with Trump. I want to point to an article Seymour Hirsch wrote, not in August of 1918, or 2018, excuse me, but in 2017, in August of 2017, over a year ago. And here's what he said. He said that Russiagate is a CIA-planted lie and revenge against Trump. This is reported not in the bought-off lamestream fake media, on Zero Hedge, August 2nd, 2017. This is written by Eric Zweiss. Here's what he said. Hirsch reveals from his inside FBI and Washington, D.C. Police Department sources, now long before the Justice Department Special Counsel Robert Mueller will be presenting his official findings to the nation, that the charges that Russia had anything to do with the leaks from the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign to WikiLeaks, that those charges spread by the press were a CIA-planted lie. And that what WikiLeaks had gotten was only leaks, including at least from the murdered DNC staffer Seth Rich, and were not from any outsider, including the Russians. Here's what direct quote from Hirsch. I can tell you right now, Brennan, former director of the CIA, a primetime player, if you will, in the fake Russian hack narrative in order to overthrow a duly elected president of the United States. I can tell you right now, Brennan is an a-hole. I've known all these people for years. Clapper is sort of a better guy, but not a rocket scientist. You know the trouble with all those guys is that the only way they're going to make it is make it to a board or two and get hired by and get some fat cat contracts is if Hillary stayed in if she won the presidency. With Trump, they're gone. They're done. They're going to live on their pensions. They're not going to make it. And I got to tell you guys, they don't want to live on their pensions. They want to be on boards. I have somebody on the inside, you know, I've been around a long time and I write a lot of stuff. I have somebody on the inside who will go and read a file for me. This person is unbelievably accurate and careful. He's a very high level guy and he'll do a favor. You're just going to have to trust me on this. I have a narrative of how that whole thing began, the Russian narrative. It's a Brennan operation. It was an American disinformation operation about effing the duly elected President of the United States, Donald Trump. The purpose of those distorting news stories might be a desire on the part of both the Democrat Party aristocrats and the Republican Party aristocrats to distract the public's attention away from the far deeper understanding that drives the narrative that Hirsch, in that clip, is describing. Wrought by the United States aristocracy, which controls both of America's political parties, to deceive the American public. The objective is to protect the aristocracy at all costs. That's not publishable. It is American censorship. Corruption rules America. The public do not. This fact is what Hirsch is describing in his narrative as outlined by Eric Zuis. And as Hirsch just published his memoir, The Reporter, he talks about the death of journalism. And with the death of journalism comes the death of the deep state. Because journalism, the lamestream fake media, is an important tentacle to the deep state, their propaganda arm. And if the propaganda arm dies, it starts to die all the way up to the head of the snake. This is what Cy Hirsch recently said. Quote, "When people are comforted by government lies, trafficking the truth becomes hellishly difficult." Remember, Hirsch won a Pulitzer Prize for Me Lying and cracked open, wide open, the abuse at Abu Ghraib. And frankly, he was ostracized by the deep state at that point. James Bovard from the American Conservative recently wrote an article about Hirsch. Here's what he said. 14 years after Hirsch broke Abu Ghraib, many of the details of the post-9/11 torture scandal remain unrevealed. Could anyone imagine Lieutenant William Calley, who was convicted of mass murder for the 1968 My Lai carnage, subsequently becoming a favorite media commentator on military ethics, foreign policy, and democracy? No. But the main culprits in the torture scandal and cover-up, which included former CIA Chief John Brennan, has become a regularly touted font of wisdom in the bought-off lamestream fake media. And what do we see? Trump has now stripped Brennan of his security clearance. Good move. Wish he did it a year and a half ago. By doing it, Trump sends a message to Brennan and to the deep state. Brennan is now become irrelevant. When a puppet of the deep state becomes irrelevant, the deep state takes action. And that's why John Brennan is hysterical. That's why he's screaming about Putin and Trump meeting. Just meeting was treasonous. It's why he's screaming about he's going to sue Trump for taking away his freedom of speech because his surveillance clearance was removed. Trump isn't saying he can't speak. He's just saying that you're tainted. You're involved in a tremendous number of nefarious activities. And you're not worthy of security clearance. But without that security clearance, John Brennan becomes irrelevant to the deep state. And he becomes, ultimately, a victim to the deep state. And that is why he is so panicked. And to make him panic more, his comrade in arms, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, recently threw Brennan under the bus. You know, Clapper, a couple weeks ago, threw Barack Obama under the bus. He said, you know, Obama's behind this Russian hack narrative. Yeah, he was. As we've outlined before on Operation Freedom, we broke it wide open. March 2017, we have the free interview on the top part of it, DaveJanda.com. Go there. It was with General Tom McInerney. Obama, Brennan, and Clapper hired a guy by the name of Dennis Montgomery to create a platform called the Hammer to illegally surveil millions of Americans. Phone calls, internet activity, financial transactions, texts. Gross violation of your Fourth Amendment rights and privileges. And they utilized the Hammer to target Trump and Flynn and their team illegally. Clapper outlined that. Threw Obama under the bus, saying, yeah, Obama kind of ran that operation. Well, now he's saying, actually, Brennan did too. Clapper turns on Brennan. Quote, John and his rhetoric have become an issue, end quote. This from Zero Hedge. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper threw former CIA Director John Brennan under the bus, telling CNN's, interesting it occurred on CNN, because so did that other Clapper clip about Obama, tells CNN's State of the Union that, quote, John and his rhetoric have become an issue in and of itself. Oh, message from the deep state. Adding, John is subtle like a freight train, and he's going to say what's on his mind. And what's on his mind is he is deeply panicked because he's getting the message that he's being cut off from the deep state. And when they cut you off, they do it on several fronts. What's happening is the rats are turning on the rats. And that's because of Trump and his administration. Love Trump or hate Trump. Bottom line, Trump is ripping down and shredding the Iron Curtain of dis and misinformation that the deep state has constructed over the past number of decades. They, the deep state, and their little puppets, Brennan and Clapper and Obama and Hillary, they created the fake Russian collusion Trump hoax. They created it for the specific reason to obliterate Donald Trump and his presidency. They realized very early on that they needed to take out Trump. He had the support of the military. He has the support of other protective services. They realized they would have a difficult time pulling a, quote, Kennedy-Dallas move, end quote. So they created this fake Russian hack narrative and collusion narrative to remove him. And it's fallen apart. And the rats, Clapper, are turning on the other rats, Obama and Hillary and Brennan. I made a prediction on Greg Hunter's show, USA Watchdog, because all of us are frustrated that we haven't seen any high-level perp walks of these players. I made a prediction. And that prediction was that as the primaries come to an end, we're going to see more and more information start leaking out. And we are going to start to see some indictments come forward. We just saw Chris Collins' indictment come out about financial collusion. We just saw 300 pedophile priest indictments hit out of Pennsylvania. There are many more that are going to be coming out. And I believe one of the top people that's going to come down in all this, early on, is John Brennan, former director of the CIA. A former director of the CIA has never been indicted. I believe it is soon going to happen. I hope you'll join us at DaveJanda.com. We provide a tremendous amount of public information, free information. We also have the very reasonably priced subscription service for 30 cents a day.
Do you know what's going to happen after this incident? Do you know who you will call for help? Do you know what you're going to do?
The July Papadopoulos Facebook message, where he reaches out to foreign contact to Tim Aviv, asking about Milian. Milian, who's contacted him before, unsolicited, and who was at this conference with Deripaska, right? The same day, Papa D Facebook messaged Tim Aviv about Milian. The Australians report to our State Department about the Downer meeting with Papadopoulos. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is a complicated case. I know we're going over a bit. I'm just going to take one more minute to tie this up. These people are clearly trying to set up Papadopoulos. What they're doing is they're setting up multiple layers of people to insulate who the people literally working for either political operatives in the United States or friendlies are. In order to do that, they're introducing him one by one to more and more people who are emailing him unsolicited to disconnect the information from the original source. They're trying to hide the fact that all roads lead back to Russian sources and Hillary Clinton's team that she brought on board. Deripaska, information to Milian. Milian reaches out to Papadopoulos. Mifsud reaches out to Papadopoulos, connects him with Tim Aviv. Tim Aviv is connected to Milian. Papadopoulos asks him about Milian. All this is left out to hide the source of the information from being Russians and Hillary in the first place. This thing absolutely stinks to the heavens. All right, folks, that's a lot of information for one day. And I wanted to do an interview, and I'm talking to him, and I had listened to that morning news station forever, and I'm like looking around. I'm like, hey, who does that character, the Colonel? Do the Colonel for him.
I say, you know, I do that voice, Mr. Bongino.
I had no idea it was Joe. I'm like, man, that guy's pretty funny. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm the Colonel. I'm like, you're the Colonel. He does all these voices at CBM. So Joe is Joe, you make me laugh with all that stuff.
I did the Colonel in a restaurant one day to whoever I was with. I must have had 4 people come over. Where's the Colonel? Where's the Colonel?
They know you from CBM. That, in fact,
funny.
was the real Al Pacino. The Joe skill. I think that's obvious. Joe has tremendous skills, but apparently not that. I mean, that would be pretty amazing if you pulled that one off. Oh, man. All right, a lot to talk about today. I teased it yesterday in the show.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to it, but I've got a couple stories to cover on this socialism thing with the Democrats, which I just don't understand. They will not let this disastrous, deadly, torturous, starvation, depravity, sick, tragic idea, was that thorough enough? Socialism go, and it's infuriating. So I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to get to this other thing, which is going to kind of blow your mind. I promise. Not kind of, it's going to blow your mind. All right, today's show brought to you by our buddy My Patriot Supply, our buddies at My Patriot Supply. Hey, in case you think my wife hates when I say that. I'm a big hey guy. I'm sorry. I don't mean it disrespectfully. It's a Queens thing. Hey,
you got my attention.
I do it all the time. I'm not kidding when I tell you I just ordered another case of My Patriot Supply emergency food. I'm not making this up. I don't spin my audience's wheels. I actively troll liberal Twitter accounts. I'm on liberal email lists. And the crisis right now is, what do we do about this socialism trend? Now, Democrats are not stupid. Radical liberals, a lot of them are. The Democrat Party, the establishment swamp rat Democrats are not dumb, Joe. There's been a rapprochement, let's say. There's been this agreement for a long time within the Democrat Party that they know socialism is an abysmal, dangerous, deadly economic failure, and it's a human crisis in the making. They know that. Mm-hmm. You may say, no, they don't, Dan. No, trust me on this. I'm talking about, Joe, the establishment swamp rats in D.C. Mm-hmm. the Pelosi, the old Harry Reid crowd, the Chuck Schumer crowd, trust me when I tell you, off the record, they absolutely know socialism will lead to death and destruction. They understand that. So their goal is what Kevin Williamson, a guy who doesn't really like me very much, but you know what, whatever. He wrote a decent book not that long ago. What's it, like The Idiot's Guide to Socialism or something, where he talks about how this agreement, this kind of this peace deal they made with the Socialist Show and the Democrat Party has been, all right, we'll accept the socialists, we'll accept big government, but we won't accept socialism. In other words, we'll let capitalism exist. We won't pursue our socialist dreams of a government planned and run economy, but we'll tax it to death. So he calls it in his book the new socialism. In other words, we won't try to confiscate and steal the means of production, steal your land and steal your businesses. We'll just tax and regulate the snot out of them. It's a good book. It's actually written in a kind of funny, sarcastic kind of way often. It's an older book, but it's very good. Meanwhile, keep in mind, this guy does nothing but take shots at me on Twitter when I promote his book. But it's a good book, and I'm trying not to make things personal. No, I'm serious. He's like the guy, whenever he gets an opportunity, I think I blocked him because I got tired of him. But the book is very good. And he talks about this new form of socialism. And the best way to explain it, Joe, if this doesn't make sense, please let me know. Old school socialism is obvious. The government comes in, controls the means of production, takes your farm, takes your land, and runs it.
Okay.
What you're seeing right now in South Africa, where the government has now, I have an article in the show notes today about this, the government has now started confiscating farms of white landowners for redistribution. That would be old school socialism, right? New school socialism is, we don't have to confiscate your business or your farm. If we tax it, in other words, we get most of the money from it because we're taxing you, and we regulate it to death, in other words, we institute a number of government regulations telling you how you can and can't run it, we have de facto socialism without having to own your business. Now, what's the benefit of that, Joe? The benefit's quite simple when you think it through. I just told you the Democrats, the Pelosi, Schumer crowd, they know socialism's a disaster. If they were to confiscate and control the means of production and support a system that does that, to be more precise, they understand the system would collapse like it has everywhere, like it's going to in South Africa, like it had in Zimbabwe, like it had in the Soviet Union, in China before they tried some attempt at market reforms. And then who gets the blame? Exactly who got the blame in the Soviet Union, the government. So they understand that there's this new socialism out there where we better not confiscate the property and confiscate the businesses outright because we have no capability to run them. So if we do this tax and regulatory scheme where we tax them, tax the snot out of them and regulate them to death, we effectively own them anyway. And then if they fail, we get to do what, Joe? Blame it on capitalism. Blame it on the business. Blame it on capitalism. So Williamson covers that in his book, and it's well done. It's really well done. You're seeing now, folks, the difference in this. You're seeing the new socialism versus the old socialism. And I have two articles in the show notes today. One's about Elizabeth Warren. It's a Lewis Woodhill piece in Real Clear Markets, and it's a very good one. Elizabeth Warren is proposing an absolutely outrageous, preposterous, insane idea. Now, Elizabeth Warren, who's never been known for proposing, rational ideas out there.
No.
But she's proposing to put forth a new position. It's a bill. The bill's not going to get more than 10 votes in the Senate, but still, it speaks to the insanity of the Democrat Party. They understand what's happening in South Africa, the outright confiscation of land, and in Venezuela, the confiscation of businesses is a broken model. So what do? She introduces, I love the flowery names of this crap too, Joe. The Accountable Capitalism Act. Oh, doesn't that sound peachy? The Accountable Capitalism Act. Yeah, that's a good one. She should really call it the let's try to replicate Soviet Union Socialism Act. This thing is total complete garbage. It would create an Office of U.S. Corporations, and it would give the director some pretty profound powers to basically redistribute capital from America's largest companies into what the progressives think are their more beneficial causes. Now, Matty Iglesias from Vox, who is about as radical a leftist, and I mean a guy who just is a total conspiracy theorist who gets nothing right practically ever, but he always is a source of good humor for the show. Matty Iglesias from Vox covered this new bill, of course, in glowing fashion. Here's a quote from him. It's in the Woodhill piece, by the way. Elizabeth Warren has a big idea that challenges how the Democratic Party thinks about solving the problem of inequality. Instead of advocating for expensive new social programs like free college or health care, she's introducing a bill on Wednesday, the Accountable Capitalism Act, that would redistribute trillions of dollars from rich executives and shareholders to the middle class without costing a dime. Huh. Wow! Without costing a... Joe, what a deal! The middle class going to get all this money and it's not going to cost anyone anything. One, that shows you how really ridiculous the intellectual vacuum goofballs like Matty Iglesias and Vox live in. It's going to... Think about what he just said. It's going to redistribute hundreds of billions of dollars into programs like... But it's not going to cost anybody anything. The money fairy exists in the mind of Matty Iglesias and Vox. Because they're idiots. These are not intelligent people. They may pretend they're intelligent, but these are ridiculous. This is garbage. Now, read the piece because Woodhill covers exactly what would happen on this. Once allocation of capital within a company is determined by the United States Office of U.S. Corporations and its director, rather than the shareholders that actually own the company and the board, Woodhill does a calculation that he believes it would wipe out approximately a small sliver of U.S. companies, Joe. It would wipe out 45%, just a tad. Yeah, he believes it would wipe out up to 13.5, not 3.5, not 1.35, $13.5 trillion in value of the largest U.S. companies. Based strictly on the fact that these companies would now not be able to allocate their capital towards value-adding activities, whatever it may be, employee compensation, capital investment, dividend distribution to shareholders of the company, investment in other companies. Remember, capital can only be allocated a few ways, right? If a company makes money, Bongino Inc., whatever it is, it can consume it, invest it, or spend it. Right. I can consume it on my own, basically spend it, give it out as dividends if I'm a publicly traded company. I can consume it on, whatever, however I decide. If I want to pay back my shareholders, bump up my stock price. If I want to, if I don't have any good investments within the company or other companies, fine, that's what you can do. You can invest it. You can invest it in other companies. So you can consume it, invest it, or you can spend it. Meaning you can spend it on capital. You can spend it on capital producing projects. You can spend it on, new t-shirt lines and whatever. You can invest in your companies, get better equipment, buy new computers. But the money doesn't disappear. And then, although Matty Iglesias, who is really a conspiracy theorist loon at this point, Matty Iglesias, although he believes that you can fabricate money out of thin air to give out, that's not what happens. You can invest it in, you can consume it by taking that money, taking it in, and basically having the company, which is owned by the shareholders, take it back. Pension funds, middle class folks, even wealthy folks who own stock. You can invest it in other companies. You can take your money and say, well, we don't have any projects right now, but I think Joe's company, we can invest in them right now. Mm-hmm. Or you can spend it. You can spend it on building your own business, getting new factories, new equipment, whatever it may be for growth in the future. The fourth option is not give it to the government and give control of it to have the U.S. government allocated towards their big government wants and needs. This is nothing but a sop for Elizabeth Warren to liberal voters out there for her 2020 presidential run to try to make pretend she's to the left of Bernie Sanders. That's absolutely what this is. I'm on a new green tea craze these days. I believe I don't know what it is, but I feel every time I drink green tea, I feel really good. So. But this, do you understand how this is the new socialism in Williamson's book? This is what he's talking about, Joe. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be Maduro or Chavez's Venezuela, where you confiscate the business. If you tax and regulate it to death, and you institute, Joe, the Office of U.S. Corporations and a director to make capital allocation decisions, who's better than you? You're a liberal Democrat. You effectively run the company anyway by taxing and regulating it to death through your Office of U.S. Corporations. But when the company fails, which they will inevitably do, what do? You do what Maduro, Chavez, and every other tyrannical, murdering, communist, socialist, tyrant thug has ever done. You blame what? The speculators and the capitalists after you destroy the economy.
It is not my fault.
That's what they do every time. That's what they do every time, Comrade Joe. Every single time. Now, what's Venezuela doing right now? Venezuela is in the process right now because of out-of-control inflation. Let me flip the pages. I was going to cover this yesterday, but I got so involved in that story. Sometimes I miss out. Venezuela, Joe, is chopping 5 zeros off of its currency. They're going to institute a new sovereign bolivar because inflation in Venezuela, it's up a little bit, Joe. It's up 61,463%. Just a tad, Joe. Just a drop. A drop in the bucket. Brutal. So, Venezuela, because they have enacted socialist policies. Now, remember which socialism. What Venezuela did was a hard socialism, not the new socialism Williamson refers to, where you don't confiscate the company, you just tax and regulate it to death, like Warren's proposing, right? Venezuela actually went in and said, no, this is now our business. Here's how this is going to roll, right? They took over a lot of the oil businesses, some grocery chains. They actually instituted a hard form of socialism. Well, what happens, folks? The same thing that happens every time. Socialists don't have the expertise to run a business. That's why they work in government, not in the business world. These people are stupid. Not only are they stupid, they're power hungry and dangerous. So they come in and they bankrupt these businesses. When they bankrupt these businesses, what happens? The government has to then provide more money to people to go out there because you work for the government in a socialist economy. So the government has to institute payment schemes to the people in form of government salaries, government jobs, government stipends. Well, what eventually happens? Joe, where do you think the money in a capitalist economy, in a free economy, the money to support these programs comes from? Businesses, right?
Yes, that is right.
This is right. So the citizenry, through successful businesses, this is kind of, I'm going back to kind of the peace deal the Democrats made a little while ago. I'm not talking about the radical Democrats. Again, I'm talking about the swamp rats. The peace deal they made is, we'll let capitalism exist because capitalism is ultimately going to fund this. It's going to fund our stream of welfare programs we want, right? So if you institute hard socialism where there is no capitalism and the government takes over the business, what happens to the business? They run the business into the ground. The business is done. They don't have the expertise or the skill. Venezuela was once one of the richest countries in South America. It is now, they're eating pigeons because the government took over the businesses and the government doesn't have the skills to run the businesses, who now are not running effective businesses, which means they're not paying taxes, which means the social programs that the socialists want to institute are not financed. So what happens next? What happens next is, Joe, the government, which has a monopoly over the printing press, does what? The printing press starts running 24 hours a day to print new money for the government to give to people through the form of social welfare programs and other socialist dreams, free this, free that. You may say, okay, problem solved. Government gets to print new money. Well, what happens when you print more money and it's not backed by any added value in the economy? Well, more money is chasing the same amount of goods. But, unlike capitalism, where inflation's still a problem, what makes it even worse in socialism, and why inflation is 61,000, just so I'm getting this right, 463% in Venezuela right now, is unlike in capitalism, Joe, where the United States still prints money through quantitative easing. We were doing, believe me, we're not free of this either. At least the United States, through this peace deal the Democrats have made with the swamp, that, all right, we'll let capitalism exist, we're just going to tax and regulate it to death. At least the economy is still growing and producing more products. Maybe not at the rate we'd want it to, especially under the Obama years, but it is still growing, which keeps inflation in check somewhat. When you're Venezuela, Joe, and you're printing the snot out of money, and that money is not only chasing the same amount of goods, but less goods, now what happens? The price you fetch for those goods is through the roof. Folks, is a very simple way to explain this. If there are 5 computers in an economy and $10, right? The maximum amount of money those computers could fetch in that closed economy, which a lot of these socialist economies are due to capital controls, the maximum amount of money it could command are what? $2 per computer. It's a simple example, but roll with it because the simplicity does not refute the premise of it.
Okay.
There's $10 in an economy. circulating around. If there's only 5 computers, the maximum amount would be $2. Remember, this is a socialist system. It's not a price system.
Okay.
In a price system, the maximum amount if there's $10 in an economy, that one computer could fetch would be what? $10, because one computer might be really, really good, and they price it, and the other 4 may suck. But that's not the way socialism works. Socialism is all about redistribution and equality and misery and poverty. From each according to their abilities, to each according to their needs. That is the very essence of socialism. But do you get it? How the computer in the United States could fetch each computer could fetch $10. In a redistribution system, is $2 each. So what happens when you print a boatload of money in a socialist system, right? Say you print, all right, we need all this money to pay off all these social programs. Say they print $100 more. So now you have $110. Now all of a sudden each computer can command a whole lot more money. The problem is there's only 5 computers. There's still only 5 computers, if not less. Because maybe one gets given to a connected oligarch. Do you get where I'm going with this? There's more and more and more paper money, Joe, chasing the same and fewer amount of products. Meaning the prices go up and up and up and up and up and up and up. First we wanted $2, then $10, and $20, and $50, and $100. That's how you get hyperinflation. It's a monetary phenomenon. Folks, this is important because liberals don't seem to get this. They seem to think money can be fabricated by some kind of a money fairy. That, like Matty Iglesias, you see him right. Oh, look at this. We can give away all this free stuff, and it's not going to cost anybody anything. Well, dude, are you sane? Are you even a rational human being? So in order to counter, Joe, the massive price increases in Venezuela from the inflation, because they're printing money, but they're not making any more goods. So more money is chasing fewer goods, which leads to price increases. What did the government say? Again, instead of letting economic freedom figure it out, the government said, I got an idea. We are going to raise the minimum wage 6,000%, demanding companies to pay more. Folks, the stupid, I know the stupid is heavy here, but this is for your socialist friends who don't understand basic economics. I'm talking about 2nd grade level economics here. Well, Joe, problem solved. Inflation's rampant, everything's expensive, so we'll just order companies to pay more. What's ironic is they do that as they institute a nationwide price control system and a tax hike on the same companies. So let's just be straight about what's going on in Venezuela here. To show, again, my whole point is to show you why far left radicals like Elizabeth Warren are still extremely troublesome when it comes to ideology, right? But why they understand that the new socialism in their mind is far superior to the old socialism. Because the old socialism is for complete imbeciles. Print a lot of money, take over the companies that produce the goods. They have no expertise to produce the goods, so less goods are produced. More money is now chasing fewer goods. The cost of those goods therefore goes through the roof because people need more money to buy those goods. Because there's less goods and more money. Government comes in, tries to solve the problem, says, well, just go ahead and pay people more. Minimum wage up 6,000%. The companies go, we can't afford to pay people more. We don't have any money as is. The price keeps going up. The government comes in and goes, that's fine. We'll take your company over too. And we'll institute a price control to prevent other companies from charging your employees high prices for the goods. Companies cannot make any money. More companies go under. The government comes in and takes them over too. And then what happens? People don't want to work because the companies are losing money. These are people who've invested in these companies. These are small businesses, large businesses. These companies, the employees don't want to work because they're not getting paid anymore. Then what happens? Then comes the force. Why socialism always leads to brutal violence, political jailing, speech suppression, and the violation of big R rights and freedom is because the end road of socialism is always, now you will be forced to work. Look at the Great Famine in China. Look at the gulags in the Soviet Union. You will work If you don't work, we will kill you, or we will jail you, or we will starve you. One of the great ironies of the Chinese famine is one of Mao and their lieutenants, their sayings was, you know, he who doesn't work doesn't eat. That's kind of interesting, isn't it, Joe? Because it's the socialists who believe they're being benevolent to the poor
Right.
and starving, when the motto and credo of socialism is we will starve you to death if you don't work for us. You don't find any irony in that at all?